Hi everyone! Hopefully you were all able to successfully navigate our first official week of class last week, and you were able to complete our assignments. So just as a reminder, the organization that you saw in last week's folder and the assignment load that you saw in last week's folder is going to be pretty much the same what you see on a week-to-week basis. The only difference is that we will start having lab quizzes now in addition to the labs. So the lab quizzes are based on what you did in lab the previous week. So this week's lab quiz is based on the scientific reasoning lab that you did last week. So please make sure that you complete the lab first before you do the lab quiz for that following week, right? So don't try to take this week's lab quiz unless you've done last week's lab. So as we started our discussion last week talking about in general what environmental biology, what environmental science really was, we also learned that just like any science, environmental science has a lot to do with asking questions, right? And that was kind of the point of the lab, was to learn in science sort of how does that process work? How do we know what we know? And we know what we know based on essentially making observations, so noticing things, seeing things, and then trying to analyze what we're seeing. So collecting data, looking for patterns. In the case of environmental science, often that will then evolve into trying to come up with solutions to potential problems that we're seeing. So environmental science is very problem-based, right? So a lot of what we're seeing and a lot of the questions we're asking are based on problems that we're seeing. And again, we kind of talked about that in the lecture video last week. So now that we sort of understand the basis for what we're going to be talking about this semester, now we're going to go and start by looking at how natural systems sort of work without the influence of humans, right? If we want to study what our impact is on the natural world, we first have to understand how the natural world works. And that's what we're going to be doing this week in class. So in our week 2 module, we're going to be talking about ecosystems. And I'm not going to lie, ecosystems, the topic of ecosystems is actually quite complex. And there are lots of different pieces to what we're going to call natural systems, ecosystems are. You have the living things that inhabit that place, so all of the plants and all of the animals and all of the microorganisms. And they're interacting with each other. And then you also have the non-living environment that they are all interacting with as well. So we have to talk about light and temperature and air and soil and all of those types of things as well. So some of the topics we'll be discussing in this particular unit include, we're going to talk about energy in an ecosystem. That's an incredibly important topic. So how do we get the energy we need to perform our daily tasks, right? So where does that energy come from? Well, in the case of people, humans, we have to eat, right, to get our energy. If you're a plant, you do something a little different, right? So you're going to learn about how energy flows through an ecosystem. You're going to learn how materials, so the building blocks of living things, things like carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus, you're going to learn how those cycle through ecosystems, how they move around. And then you're also going to learn about how living things are interacting with each other. So again, this is a big chapter of information. So I freely admit that this will be one of the bigger topics we kind of tackle, and I know we tackle it early on. But again, it's important to know how the system works before humans become involved in it. So in lecture materials this week, I have a few extra things. So I have the reading as usual, my lecture video about ecosystems, and my notes about ecosystems. Then I have a couple of other additional videos that you might want to view to help you understand things. In particular, biogeochemical cycles. And it's a big word. Essentially, it means how molecules to build cells are cycled through the environment, basically. So again, I have a breakdown of the different cycles that we're going to be talking about: carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. These are nice, quick, very short videos that give you a good explanation. There's also an additional video here about species interactions. And before the pandemic, we actually would take students to Costa Rica on a study abroad field trip, and we worked with the a field station there in Costa Rica. And Gustavo here actually was one of our partners down in Costa Rica, and so what he's done is he's created a series of videos about Costa Rica and actually about some of the topics we'll be discussing. So you'll see a few of these videos not just this week but in the future as well. So this is the first one. It's a completely optional video, but again, it kind of gives you a good glimpse into what these types of interactions look like in a Costa Rican rainforest. And then, of course, the practice quiz is here as well. So once you have finished everything in the lecture materials, then you can move on to lab this week. So again, the lab quiz I have here is first. So once again, that is based on last week's lab, which was the scientific reasoning lab. Then this week's lab is an ecosystem lab. Or an ecology lab, as I'm calling it. So I would really love for you guys to get outside for part of this lab. First 15 to 20 minutes, just the first part, we're coming up with a list of species that live sort of in our local ecosystems here. I know it's cold, I know it's winter, we're expecting some snow this week. However, if you've never gone outside and just spent some time observing nature in the winter, it's a much different experience than experiencing nature any other time of the year, because it's much more quiet, it's much more still, and yet there are still quite a few things to see. So I posted a little video. I went to a local nature preserve here in the area, Crabtree Nature Center in Barrington, and I did a little bit of recording of some things you can look for while you're out doing this part of your lab. I've also given you some additional resources to help you identify some of the birds you might see, to identify some of the other things that are running around this winter, some animals. And also, again, if you're really wanting to test your knowledge, you can do some winter ID for trees. It's not easy, I will say that. Identifying trees without leaves on them is a little bit tricky, but again, if it's something that interests you and you want to challenge yourself, go for it. I've given you a guide for that as well. And then here's the lab itself, and so you will complete this and upload that this week. Last but not least is our assignments folder. So you will do a discussion. So there is a discussion that I am leading once again this week. Please make sure that you both respond to the prompt itself and then also reply to at least one other student. And again, if you need tips on best practices for that, please check out the course orientation folder on Blackboard. And then the next thing you're going to do is I'm going to stop leading discussion and you're going to start leading discussion. So for the next 8 weeks, because we have 8 students in each discussion group, you're going to sign up to lead discussion 1 week. And the way that you're going to do this is I have a sign-up sheet that you're going to click on. Please note that the sign-up sheet is particular to your learning team. So you are either team 1, 2, or 3. Again, that information is available when you click on Learning Team Discussion Group. It'll show you your group. So if you're team 1, make sure it says team 1 at the top. If you're team 2, it says team 2 at the top. And if you're team 3, it says team 3 at the top. So you're going to pick a week when you want to lead discussion. And I've already given you the topics that we'll be talking about that week. And what you're going to do is you're going to find some type of an article that relates to what we're talking about. So if you decide that air pollution sounds interesting to you, you're going to write your name down for air pollution. And this will be your week to lead discussion. And you're going to go and find some type of an article that discusses air pollution. And it can be anything. It can be about anywhere as long as it relates to air pollution. So then what you'll do is you will create a discussion forum, and I'll have another video next week that shows you how to do that. You'll create a discussion forum with a link to your article, and then you're going to summarize it and respond to it, okay? So I gave you an example. Here's someone who posted an article They summarized the article, and then they said, wow, I chose it because, and then they gave me some information. All right. So that's something else you're going to do this week, is you're going to sign up to be a discussion leader. So you get to choose the week you want, pick the topic that looks most interesting to you. And then last but not least is the check-in survey. So please make sure that you're doing those as well. Again, I am responding to all of the questions that will be posted there. You'll be able to click on this message forum here. And I have a forum called Response to Socratic Questions, which I'll post all of the answers to your questions there. So that does it for this week. Once again, if you all have any questions at any time, please let me know. That is what I am here for. I am here to help. Have a great week, everybody.